as you walked into the room, you hopefully noticed a difference in the atmosphere. It's a pretty nice day out, so it's not as apparent as some days. But when you walk into this room, you're walking into a controlled atmosphere, and it's that way 24/7, year-round. And what it is, it's the middle of the known guitar playing world in temperature and humidity. So it's midway between the extremes. Let's say Stockholm, Sweden in the winter where there's no moisture in the air, to Singapore where it's really humid all the time. And in those extremes, the guitar top can shrink about 3/8 of an inch. And that's enough to separate it at its weakest point. It's usually not a joint either. It's usually a crack in the body of the wood. Or in a humid atmosphere, it'll swell to where it doesn't sound good and it affects the action. It's just not pleasant to play. So by building in the middle, we can go both directions, the broadest bandwidth of comfort for the guitar. Processing the wood is equally important for stability of the guitar. It's only one factor. Our business model was never a business model. It was how to support a guitar making habit. And therefore we did it all backwards. It's reverse engineered. We want to make the best guitar we possibly can because that makes it fun, and then find ways to support that habit by talking people into buying them. So when it comes to acquiring wood, we don't have the usual boundaries and constraints that a prudent business would by, okay, here's our price target, so we spend this much for wood and this much for labor. We go, okay, here's our quality target, what does it take? Okay, so where that comes from in the wood is we simply want the most resonant wood possible, and we want it to know it's responsibly harvested. Not only hear that, but we want to verify that. So the woods that I'll talk about here, we know where they've come from all the way to the beginning, the source, and we've chosen them because they have the potential for excellent resonance, and we'll verify that. So here's a beautiful thing. You can get both of those things, responsible harvest and the most resonant possible wood, when you use wood that's removed from the living tree. The longer the better. Matte Sinker redwood has the advantage of the same trick that the Italian masters used in preparing their wood for their instruments and the violins for resonance. And what that was they sunk them underwater. They're spruces and maples. And what happened in that time, let's say up to a generation in that condition, the polymerization of the resins happens independent of moisture. So you can't dry it hard, and it hardens in water. But another thing happens underwater, which is the sugars, the nutrients that are all the way through the cellular structure, when you arrest the growth or the living part of the tree, they're stuck in there, and underwater they'll dissolve and wash out. So you mean this nice, clean, clear, resonant stuff, and the resins that you're not getting out of the wood polymerize and become more resonant. So perfect way to get wood to go. So when we buy wood that's old and sunk for a long time, we get the same advantage in what we have. And we didn't have to go out and just cut one tree. But the problem with irresponsible harvest, it's removing a tree from the ecosystem, but it's disrupting the ecosystem as well as the cultures that depend on that. And in my early career, I saw that stuff firsthand, and I promised myself we wouldn't be part of that process of deforestation or irresponsible harvest. The beautiful thing is we don't have to compromise to do that. Getting woods from reclaimed sources is obvious, but there's other ways we can do responsible harvest. And here's a great one. This is our darling Brazilian rosewood, and this is exceedingly rare because it's been super desirable since it was discovered by the Spanish hundreds of years ago when they came into South America. That's a nice piece, isn't it?
Yummy.
That's a nice piece. And this is so old. Well, I'm jumping ahead of myself. The responsible harvest of this is these trees were probably cut in the 1930s. Here's a neat secret, is Brazilian rosewood is not pretty in the living state. It's kind of pink and not very interesting, but it goes through a secondary process once it dies, and it gets all this nice inky stuff. So in the very beginning, people weren't getting rosewood trees for rosewood; they were looking for old down trees. So it makes it rare even then. So these trees that were cut so long ago, We have the benefit of the polymerization of the resins, the sugars being rinsed out of it, and it's beautiful. And we didn't cut down a tree to get it, or wreck anybody's livelihood. And as you know, it sounds spectacular. This stuff can sound like a tile when you tap on it. So there's the responsible harvest. We're actually reclaiming this from the rest of it. And it's not a rainforest timber. It grows solitary on the savanna, and which adds to its rarity too. The complications now with it being on the endangered species list and all the regulations, import, export, it's part and parcel of just being protective of the whole ecosystem. So there's one. This mahogany is a beautiful one. Mahogany is a rainforest timber. The modern harvest of it is almost all unconscionable, and what is responsible is hard to verify. Even if it's certified by a recognized agency, you better ride with it all the way through to find out where it comes from. So we don't like buying this stuff out of South America for that reason. This stuff is not plantation grown. It's sustainable yield like a Christmas tree farm. It's planted semi-annually. It grows to maturity, can be harvested, and there's ones coming up all along. And it's about an 80 to 100 year cycle. So this has actually been in the works for the last 100 years, and we're just starting to benefit from it. Your Indian rosewood is a great example of responsible harvest. This family we've dealt with for generations, and they're really protective of the resources because they like to have it in the family for generations. So here is Indian rosewood, and Matt, this is very similar to yours. You recognize the really dark look and the tight grain. Well, what it is, it's a tree that would have fallen from windfall, lightning strike, natural old age, and reclaimed from the forest floor. And it has the properties we're talking about. It's dense, it's hard, it grew slowly, and the ton of this is going to be different from this. This is the same kind of tree, same kind of wood, but this was a sustainable yield, and it's grown to shade coffee crops. How PC can you get? Again, it's planted semi-annually. It grows faster, the grains are further apart, and it has a different tone. One's not better than the other. They're just different. You can hear that nice ring to its wood. The cocobolo, we were introduced to that through hurricane blowdowns in Central America. Obviously trees that got wiped out in a hurricane, and we were able to get in the reclamation of that. That was the introduction. Since then, we've been able to find it in dead standing trees and keep that same process. So we get a lot of advantages. Now, we'll make 500 or 600 guitars this year, which is coincidentally the same amount of guitars that Taylor or Martin make. The difference is we'll take a year to do that, and they do that in one day. And so it's a different scale of building, and the reason we keep it that small is to get this quality of materials, which are a limited resource, and not the regular food chain that those guys buy from. This is Brazilian rosewood, or Dalbergia nigra's closest sister, and it's Dalbergia spruciana. And it's, I can tell at a glance that it's not Brazilian, but it has real similar color, real similar qualities, a little more towards the cocobolo. Feel how dense that is.
Wow.
Sounds like slate.
Yeah, it is. It's spectacular. It's going to be a great alternative. I didn't used to talk in terms of alternatives to Brazilian, but it's such a political hot potato now. Sure. We do, and it's stupidly expensive. It's expensive way out of proportion to anything it brings to the guitar because of the complicated harvest, etc. This stuff right now is certified. It's Forest Stewardship Council certified, means it's been responsibly handled all the way through the food chain up to us, and we can all good conscience build it into a guitar, get a Brazilian sound, and people can not worry about having it confiscated when they go to Amsterdam. And this is our working stock right here. You can find materials, mahogany from an old boat building company. There's some woods that from a retired and a departed luthier. There's some stuff that's reclaimed from old down trees, stuff like that. And there's some stuff that's responsible harvest. So a nice mix of that. And the neat thing is we know it all where it comes from. The basic difference between us and a mass producer of guitars is we control the way it sounds. And making a guitar, you can do it like making a chair or an automobile. And if you define what all the measurements are, you then can assign machinery to specialize in making these parts exactly the same size. It can be done really efficiently. So you can make a guitar kit that then your workers can assemble in fixtures that only allow it to go one way. So it minimizes mistakes, keeps the cost and the time way down, and it goes to the marketplace quicker at a lower price, which, as we talked about, is a beautiful thing because it gets guitars in the hands of people that couldn't otherwise afford them. And no matter how cheap the guitar, it still sounds cool. You know, it's still a fun thing. You can write a song, tell a story, and it's of value. What we're doing is we're making the most sophisticated tool possible for somebody to express their creativity. It's a different story. So we're using the tradition of luthiery, and let's contrast that to the mass production. What the luthier did, and that's not steel string guitars, that's only 100 years old. This goes back to the violin tradition. The luthier, instead of, where it counts, instead of making a component to a dimension, they did it to a frequency. And when you build your instrument, you're composing it like a chord on a piano. Rather than putting together measurements, you're putting together actual notes. And when those are in harmony, it allows sustain, that vibration lasts a long time, and it develops overtones, rich, full, colorful, desirable sound above that. And you can do that. It takes time, but you can do that. And so there's the difference. In the luthiery tradition, you're composing the instrument like carefully choosing notes on the piano according to music theory. In the assembly of pre-made components, you're throwing rocks at the piano with your eyes closed. It's random. But to be charitable here, although we control the sound of every guitar and we always get excellence in what we do, in the mass production, if you throw enough rocks at a piano, law of averages says you get a chord every once in a while. So you will get an excellent sounding guitar in mass production. You'll also get real bad sounding guitars and every variation in between. So there's the difference with what we do. You were asking the question about tone. How do I decide what's a warm tone or a bright tone or whatever? So let me show you. Here we have, these are actually the little veneers or head plates that go on the head of the guitar for decoration, but they do have inherently a tone that's specific to the woods. Tone is a quality of sound that's bright or dark, not high or low. The difference between your guitar really close to the bridge and getting a clean, bright, strident tone, or playing up over the sound while getting a warm tone. So let's go through this. Take a piece of Indian rosewood. It's clear, but it's not sharp. It has a roundness to it or a warmth to it that'll translate to the sound of the guitar. Here's our Brazilian rosewood.
Whoa.
Don't think about the high or low, but the tone.
Yeah, it's different size wood.
Yeah, it's a little more, I'm going to say complex, it's not accurate, but it's a little more interesting, but it's also got that kind of rounded quality, but a little more clarity, okay, than the Indian.
So it's like you have to separate pitch from...
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
The frequency, we'll manipulate that later.
Right.
So let's go into mahogany. What I'm feeling for here, by the way, is like the harmonic on a string. It's a neutral point that allows the thing to vibrate rather than deaden. And there it is. It's brighter still. Okay.
That makes me want to ask though, when you say feeling for, because I know Joe's talked a lot about how when you're tapping these woods, part of it is hearing the sound, but part of it is how you feel it.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll go into that in some depth when we get to tuning the guitar top.
Okay.
So this is, it's just like, if you touch the 12th fret lightly, it divides it in two separate vibrational lengths, and you get the octave. It's very clean and clear and like a little bell. You move slightly off that, it doesn't change the pitch, it deadens it. and that's what I'm playing with here. So anyway, back to this. Mahogany is very desirable because it has qualities of the rosewood, the warmth, but a little bit more clarity. Is that better? No, but you're going to hear each note a little more distinctly with it because of that tone. And then let's go to this Cocobolo. It's almost like a tile. And what we've heard in the variation here is tone, and these woods will contribute that quality to the guitar. So we were talking earlier about, let's generalize, say the bluegrass player generally wants a nice warm blended tone, but as those players have got more into stepping into the lead and playing single line notes, mahogany is becoming more popular. Not more than rosewood, but it's becoming increasingly popular in bluegrass because people want to hear that. Or Eric's guitar out of Cocobolo, beautiful for him with that clarity because you want to hear every note he plays. Here's a couple of neat pieces of wood that are native to our mountains. This is sycamore. It's very mahogany-like, and it's in its tone really resonant. So Matt, follow me over here if you would, you guys. And I love using this as an example. My first guitars, and our first guitars at Santa Cruz Guitar Company, these fret slots were done by taking a ruler that was marked in hundredths of an inch. Now I can't, it looks like a gray line to me, right. But then I could actually put a magnifying glass on, take a little scribe point and measure and put a little point where the fret was going to be, and I got practice enough I could cut the fret slot, and I could get it within about 3 decimal points of accuracy. That's through practice. It's really, really good. And so a human can do this, but the information that's just one way. It's mechanical, it's mathematical. You don't want the mark of the craftsman. Yeah. Where these frets go. You don't even care about what their opinion is. You want them in the right place. So the point is, although you can get really good at that by hand, after a couple of hundred of them, not only is the thrill is gone, but you're just wasting your time. You're starting to develop repetitive stress from these motions, and your brain is shrinking because you don't have purpose. It's all done for you. So why in the world have the guys that can do all this exquisite handwork spend their time doing this when we can mechanize it? And there's a few processes we can mechanize to free up everybody to do the fun work. 65% of what we do is custom, like we did for Eric. And that's the fun stuff. And to support that custom work, we need to be able to make any part of the guitar completely by hand. But we also need to make any standard part of the guitar automatically, so we don't burn these people out and waste their time. Right. So come on over here and I'll show you what we're doing. Yeah. Casper, this is Matt and PT.
There it is.
Casper's done a lot of guitar making, and like everybody here, he's specialized in each thing. He's probably got masterful at it. And one of his duties now is to load and set up these guitar necks. And what we're doing is we're not automatically carving all our guitar necks. We're doing the part of the guitar neck that's the same each time. Truss rod slot, dovetail joint, and things like that, so that our master carver can do the hand carving on the important work. Just like the fret slot. Right. And this machine, the mechanical technology goes back a couple hundred years. It's a way to cut like a drill and have the two tables go this way and this way. And in the old days, a skilled operator turned cranks and held really tight tolerances to make like a gear for a machine or a farm implement. And now it's done by taking the handmade piece, scanning it, and through a software program, we tell these motors where to push the table.
So cool.
It's a robot.
Yeah.
But by itself, it just sits there. All the information comes from the guitar maker. And you know what? It's really not time-saving for us. not the way we use it. What you'll find in mass production is a battery of these machines will be assigned to making a part, and they make the kits for guitar making. Great efficiency. So let's step over here and I'll show you a progression. I have a catalog of standard models, and that represents about 35% of what we do. The rest are custom, and among those, a lot of them are going to be something custom with the neck. So let's go back to the standard model. Somebody saw Eric play in a concert or do a workshop. They loved everything about his guitar, and they want one just like it. So we've set up to carve that neck and programmed to carve it exactly like the one we did for him. And it can be done to this point automatically. It's really, really nice resolution. And what that did now is free up our carver to do the custom stuff. Somebody loved that neck, but the strings are too close together. They need more space, or they want less space, or a different shape. That's where the artistry comes in for the handwork. So this neck right here, as you see, it's had the truss rod slot cut, a couple little indexing holes, and it will have the dovetail joint cut, but the rest will be carved by hand to meet the customer's needs. Here's one that is, we've added one more step, which we've handmade the overlay, put it on here, and the machine can cut the peg head shape, and the rest can be done by hand. So any neck's going to be a combination of machine and hand, or all one or all the other. So the simple rule with this is this machine, we never allow it to dictate our designs. As in, oh well, it can do 95%, that's good enough, or let's just make it on the machine because it's faster. We don't allow that. Our designs dictate what we allow the machine to do. Here we come. Adam Rose, Matt Richter, and Eric Skye.
Hi, Adam.
I want to introduce Adam. Adam and I have worked together over 2 decades, and Adam is a master luthier in his own right and understands all the makings of the guitar. So Adam's the one in charge of designing the stuff that then this machine will do. Like I said, it's not a guitar maker on its own. It won't do anything. And by using a guitar maker to do these designs, we have a great advantage over having a machinist tell us what to do. So Adam, if these guys are a little on time constraint, if you could give them an outline of what we're doing, I'd love to get it in your words.
Yeah, well, this is it's a CAD CAM program, which means the CAD part of it is computer-aided drafting, so we can draw anything in 2 or 3 dimensions that we want, and then the computer-aided CAM part is computer-aided machining, and so we can simulate the machining of the object on the screen. So this is a fingerboard taper, a custom fingerboard taper that I just did, and so you can actually watch it cut that. That's pretty boring right there, but this is actually the more complex kind of. This is actually your neck. I just got done programming out their Skye model.
Recognize your touch.
And so we can take.
See my smudges on there.
So we can take a hand-carved neck, which we did in the case of this one, and we can digitize it with a laser digitizer. We get a very fine resolution copy of that surface, which we can turn into a CAD surface. And then we apply a tool path to that, and you can see that those lines are actually the path of the tool that's going to carve the neck. And then you can verify that all on the screen, watch it happen, and then the software spits out the code that tells the machine to do that.
That's way too
That's
cool.
amazing.
So, that's the short version. So we can do that.
Busy yet?
We can do that with anything from a complex neck carving surface like that to something like this, where we have wood bindings on an overlay that we want to cut out exactly without having to bend them. We can cut them out so that the miters fit precisely. We can do inlays like this, where we're taking a 10,000ths end mill that's just a couple hairs big and cutting out fine curl shapes and alignment.
Wow.
So it's a hugely versatile machine. So
We're
it's all kinds of
both
stuff.
huge advocates for the human factor too. So do you have the cowgirl inlay in here still?
Actually, I just finished that and gave it to Joseph.
Okay, I'll
It's out
show you
there.
as we go, because we do, with the custom stuff, there's a lot of one of a kind, not to be repeated things, and it only makes sense to do that by hand.
Sure.
And plus keep our skills up for that stuff. Because although Adam can draw all these pieces, some of them we want to hand do, because there's stuff we'll capture by hand that we wouldn't get by going through the sterile process of drawing. Example of the difference between the CNC or the robot part and that is custom touches. And so Joseph's our secret weapon for getting somebody anything they want. And some of the variances in the neck can be the shape, and that could be desirable because somebody's familiar with the neck, they've played all their life, they want to duplicate it, or a lot of people like me that have played guitar for 30 or 40 or 50 years start to hurt.
There she is.
Oh, there she is. There's this is our limited edition 35th anniversary cowgirl. Her name's Clementine, and that's hand done.
Yeah, that thing in person is truly a mind blower.
Yeah. That's a sweet one.
Yeah.
So back to the customer's press, a more ergonomic neck would actually be a little fatter one with a little wider space between the strings, not unlike what you're looking for in yours.
Right.
The reason the guitar necks got skinnier is probably, I don't know, but it's not ergonomic at all. So a skinny neck, strings close together, it's a pretty good way to develop problems if you play for years and years and years. So those could be custom, but remember also Eric's talking about the length of string can change the tension, the feel, and also the distance between frets. There's another thing we can do custom. And decorative, of course. And also remember I was talking about presence with the guitar. So think of this. The guitar body is a resonant chamber. When you excite that vibration can chimney into the neck, and the neck becomes part of the resonating presence of the guitar. So you have a more open, almost like a broadcast, a floodlight. And you can encourage that by making the neck lighter weight and allowing the vibration to chimney into it. If you don't, you make the neck heavy, like an archtop guitar, maple, big peg head, heavy gears, you in effect block a lot of the vibration from chimneying into it, and you give the guitar more focus. So it's like narrowing a beam as you do it. And you can do that in many ways. You do it with the wood, you could do it with different densities of the same wood. You could put heavier, lighter gears, slotted peg head, whatever. But to achieve that, but importantly, since you have a lot of tricks to do that, you could counteract the effect of a slotted peg head somewhere else. So just because it's a slotted peg head, you don't have to have a certain effect. When I was talking about the violin makers and how they prepared their wood, after they pulled them out of underwater, they'd cut them into sizable components, and they stacked them like you see right here in these stacks with sticks in between for airflow, and they put them in an outbuilding, a completely uncontrolled environment, and the process was called seasonings because it went through years and years and years of seasonal cycles of hot, cold, wet, dry, so it would shrink, swell, expand, contract until it didn't anymore, which means it reached stability, and now you put it in a violin and stay put. So nobody sunk the wood for us years ago, so we find it, and nobody put this out for us a generation ago to season it, so we do it ourselves by creating our own weather. And there's a little gray shack in that room that you pass by, and it's a series of baffles, and we control the velocity of airflow, the temperature, and the amount of moisture in the air, or we take moisture out of the air. So we can create weather, and we can have it go through a ton of weather cycles in a shorter period of time and reach the stability. We take almost all the moisture out of it, so when it comes back into this controlled environment, it gains 6% moisture content, which is perfect for an instrument. Our furniture maybe is 8% to 12%, and our houses are like 18%. So it's pretty well controlled, and it has to be at a point where it can go out and shrink and swell, but it's not going to do it rapidly after all that. The glue that we use primarily, we use 7 different kinds of glues, but the primary glue is a wood glue, and it's water-based and it's harmless. You could put it in your mouth if you wanted to, and subsequently people use their finger to spread the glue on the braces, and then we grow these beautiful stalactites. And it goes like this. When we first started out, I watched this start to happen, and I went, okay, we can either discipline ourselves to stay really, really clean, or we can consider this an art form. And the art form is a lot easier to manage, so there you go. Remember we talked about the wood, the tone is inherent in the wood. Unless you're going to put a brass nut or saddle or titanium pin in it, the tone comes from the wood, and it's personal choice, and it's very different. It can vary from piece to piece from the same tree and the same board, but it's very different in the different kinds of wood. This is a European spruce, probably Italian. It has a nice, clear, bright tone. Here's Engelmann from the U.S. It's got a little rounder tone to it. And here's a piece of cedar that has these qualities we're talking about in the redwood.
Yeah.
Now that's interesting. That is a really interesting sound. And I tried to hit them with about the same amount of energy. And if this was a top that had already been thicknessed, you would really see the difference in how it moves out at the edge with the cedar for the same amount of energy. So, okay, remember my explanation of mass production of the guitars were assembling components that are pre-sized. Well, with that, you don't control the sound of this because every piece of wood sounds different. But if you do wish to control the sound of the guitar, this top won't be done to a measurement. It'll be done to a frequency, but also a flexibility. And that flexibility relates directly to the frequency that this will be. In fact, an alternative to listening to a top would be weighting it and seeing how much it moves. And that's going to be, to get consistency, you have to vary the thickness. That's where the control comes in. So this top, we have captured in this piece of wood everything the customer wants in sound, minus what the sides and back will contribute. And what it's got is it's got tone from the wood, and in this case we want a guitar that's clearer, you can hear notes a little better, and it's going to be powerful. You can't overdrive it. I don't think you could hit it hard enough to overdrive it. It's for a right-handed player. And that's it, because bass strings are going to be here, treble strings are going to be here.
You actually, it goes to that level, huh?
Listen to this.
Wow.
There's your answer.
Yeah. So this already knows what to do because we told it so. There's hubris. It's got the qualities, but they need to be. This needs to be refined. Okay. First off, they wouldn't hold the string pull, so we're going to work with that. But the thickness was determined by it getting to its liveliest point. And it's been thickness for this instrument. We're considering tension of the strings, etc., and the balance, or the EQ, the graphic equalization of that top. So the next step is to put braces on. However, how we shape these braces, one step ahead, is going to really determine that graphic equalization. We can move these sliders any way we want in the guitar, and we're going to do that by how we shape these. But first, the position of them also gives us a help in the EQ. Treble bass, you can see where the treble, this asymmetry, the treble converges to tighten it up, and the bass fans out to make it more flexible. At this point, we could decide another part of this balance. If we really wanted this bassy, we could move this joint right here a little north and move these legs up and really free up more flexibility. The fundamental here is stiffness promotes treble, flexibility promotes bass. So by scooting this forward or forward shifted or advanced X, we boost the bass. But we also affect it by how we shape this. Here's two dreadnoughts, same size, and you can see the difference in the shape of the braces.
Wow.
So here's what we're doing. This is it's a real traditional look. It's what people call scallop brace advanced X. It's like the old pre-war Martin. And what the design does is here on the treble, we've really weakened the integrity of the treble by scooping it out here, 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 and scalloping this out. So we really took the stiffness out of the treble. And what that did is it lowered the volume of the treble. So we moved the treble slider down. And in scalloping out here, we really make the lower bout more flexible. So it really boosts the bass. So we've got a real predominant bass. We're coming scooped out the mid-range, and we want a little bit up in the treble because modern bluegrass playing people want to play some single note leads. So that's what we did with our sliders on a graphic equalizer with this. With this one, we go the other direction. We left the treble really stiff here. We didn't scoop this out, and these are left really strong in here as opposed to scooting them out here on the bass. So we put most mass in the treble, boosting the treble response, and then as we came out to the mid-range, we begin immediately to remove material and bring the bass in the mid-range up to and slightly above the treble. So we've got a guitar that's more evenly balanced, a little predominant in the bass, which is pleasing to our ear, but this will be a dream to record. You know, engineer would go, ooh, play that one.
Right.
You know, you really can get what you want out of it. So when we build a guitar, we're either shaping these for what we want in our standard model, or we're improvising and modifying it for what the person wants. And like it's your choice. If it was a perfect balance, they wouldn't let you move those sliders. They wouldn't put them on your sound system.
You guys made me a dreadnought this year. There was the DH model, which was
a
a hybrid bracing.
Yeah.
And boy, is that super cool. I mean, it's just way magna cool.
Yeah, that's we're not limited to one or the other. We can do everything in between, just like the sliders.
Yeah.
Okay,
So if I buy a used Santa Cruz off the internet, I have absolutely no idea how you guys built it then.
Yeah, you just call us up. Give us a serial number, and we'll tell you. Yeah, we got records on all this, and if you buy, if you bought a standard model, you can know what it is.
Okay.
But we could have done a variance on it, and the only sure way to know is give us a serial number. We can tell you. Remember, I said we have tone, and now we really have the EQ or the balance in this guitar. There's a couple of other things we can do to manipulate it. One is how big the body is. Dreadnought's inherently going to be more bassy than a small body guitar, and the size of the aperture of the sound hole will affect the balance. So we got a lot of tricks to control the balance, meaning that we can do stylistically, we can do something with the sound hole that's counter to what the customer wants, and we can make it up somewhere else.
I have a question. So was it working on Tony's guitar way back when that was the aha moment about the effect of the size of the sound hole?
Tony Rice's old Martin the sound hole been cut out to the first rosette ring because it was all chewed up. So it wasn't done as a sound modification. Right. It was just done. And he wanted that in the guitar we made for him, but I didn't want to do it until I understood what it did. So the acoustic physics of that is that the larger the aperture on a resonating chamber, the higher the fundamental pitch of the chamber. So this is counterintuitive, but you make the sound hole bigger, you raise the pitch, and you accentuate mid-range and treble. You make it smaller, and it accentuates bass. So it's a really cool way to do that. And so a lot of the stuff we learned because we had to do it, and we wanted to find out what the effect was.
Right.
So, speaking of sound holes,
Yeah.
what's your thought on the sound ports on the side?
I'm striving for a definitive answer on this. I got two nice heavyweights. One's a doctor of acoustic physics, and the other one's a aficionado of violin dynamics. Like, what does it do? Some things people say it doesn't do. Some it might. I wish I had a guitar I could show you. One of the demonstrations you'll see people do is they'll strum the guitar and somebody takes their hand off and on. It's like a swell on an organ. You go, oh well, that obviously shows it makes a difference.
Right.
But you can do the same thing on a guitar with no sound port, just by letting your hand off it.
Sure.
And taking it off, you probably use.
And sure, and if you're right over
Yeah.
that sound port, obviously, you're,
Yeah. Now, one thing people say that's interesting is it can be like a monitor, and you can hear the guitar, what you're doing with the guitar better. And I go, yeah, well, we don't have any trouble hearing our guitars, so it doesn't drive me to add cost and that to the guitar unless it adds value. So I'm not casting judgment. I don't know what the benefits of the sound port are. It's embarrassing. We've never done it for the simple reason is I don't have a reason to yet. You know, some people say it's like, oh, it lets the guitar breathe and it gives it more volume. We have ways that we control the volume, and we make guitars as loud as we want, so we don't need to do that to get that effect. And I want to say this again carefully. I'm not casting judgment on that, because these are my opinion about what it might do, and that we may achieve it better without adding cost to the guitar. And unfortunately, there's also a prideful issue. I don't want to be me too, and add a sound port to our traditional guitars, because it bespeaks of, oh well, what were you doing wrong before?
Right.
So if I wanted to be silly about it, I'd go, okay, so I got a garden hose and I'm squirting water in the garden, and I want it to work better, so I'll poke a hole in the side of it.
As a monitor, it gives you kind of a funky perception of how the guitar sounds.
His opinion might be much more.
I mean, my guitar's playing loud. I can hear it. I don't have that problem with needing the monitor. But if I did, I'm not sure. If you put your ear right up to the sound hole, that's not. The sound is really happening, 2 feet in front of it. It's this combination of all of these things. It's like if you have a sound hole microphone, you're just eliminating so much of what's really happening. It's kind of a weird perception. So just this little tiny hole, I don't like the way it sounds. What's coming out of there? I'd rather hear what's the bigger picture, I think.
So reeling the tape back, the answer is I don't know.
Yeah. I like that. I've seen a couple people who have done on more sort of contemporary instruments done like a sliding door, and that could be kind of a neat.
Oh,
way.
God,
But that's one more thing, though. And
that's so
I would
much
be
fun.
concerned about rattling too. So.
It's so much fun to do that stuff. Remember when we were talking about this, what would you suggest for an up-and-coming luthier? Like, how do you stand out? How do you get attention to have somebody sit down and play your guitar instead of the other 400 people in this exhibition? Well, at first it was sound ports and arm bevels. Now everybody's got a sound port and an arm bevel, so we will come up with some new things. But look at what we're learning by this combined effort, and people talking to each other. That's really why guitars steel strings are advanced so much in the last 40 years, is we started talking to each other. So, cool thing. So now we've got all those qualities in the guitar, but remember I was saying these things are your choice. There's no right or wrong. Balance, tone, things like that. Now we want those things that make the guitar sound excellent, no matter what, and that's sustain and overtones. And those are back to the composition. If you put together notes or frequencies that are complementary to each other, it allows the vibration to last a long time, and it develops overtones. The difference between knocking on a rock and hitting a note on a piano. So how do you get overtones and sustain out of this is it has to agree with itself. So back to our factory model, if we pre-shaped all these braces and put them on here, we have no idea what the frequencies would be, and it's like throwing rocks on a piano. You might luck out and get a good one, it might counter itself, but you probably get somewhere in between. So the way to make this thing really work, first I promised you I'd show you, so you didn't have to rely on my words. Also told you I'd warn you when it was my opinion, and that sound port stuff was my opinion. So here's one that we made the braces, we put them on, it's random, okay? We threw rocks at the piano on this. So let's listen to it. there's a difference. Can hear distinct frequencies, but they're not very defined. It's hard to tell the difference. And listen for sustain now. Listen for how long this lasts. Pretty short. Because it's random, it could have been great, but not likely. Odds against it are not so good. So on this one, we have a lot of, I'm going to call it discordance or fighting itself, and don't buy this one. Okay. So if we tune these, we can get this. We can have really distinct notes that the intervals between them give us harmony. Doesn't matter what the notes are, just that they're the proper distance apart. So let's listen to this one. You can hear really distinctly the notes, and with all this ambient noise in here, it's hard to get this, but it's sustaining. So that we're going to get what we want out of this. We're going to get sustain and the development of overtones, but in and of itself, it's not supported. This won't sound very good in concert. So what we do with the rest of the guitar is going to support this. We're going to create an airspace to amplify.
I like how you have really just different notes all the way around. Is that kind of the essence of when we say complex harmonics? Because you're getting all those.
Yeah, well, when they all go to work at once, it develops the overtones.
Yeah.
This guitar is going to go through the process, and we're going to support what we've done here, amplify it, and direct it a little bit. So let's go into the next stage here. Let me give you guys samples of this. I don't know if I've given you that before to play with. Okay, remember we were talking about presence, where the guitar sounds the biggest?
Right.
And this is pure violin making ideas. And as I said, I've found out that I brought it up to a couple of classical builders, a couple of famous classical guys, and they were like, how did you know about that? And what it is think of this: when the top is glued to this, these linings increase the gluing surface. But once we cut the binding ledge out, it's what the top sits on. The top really suspended by those linings. And if we used a solid piece of wood that was resonant, like a cedar, let's say, or a spruce, it would very efficiently transfer that energy from the strings, like dropping a little pebble in a pool. The ripple would move out to the edge and then through the lining into the side. So you as a player would benefit from that energy, but the audience would not get it. So the 10 cents you have to spend on presents, you get like 4 cents, the audience would get 6. Or depending on what you did with that, you could manipulate that balance. So we're not using solid wood, as you can see here. It's a complicated series of cuts, and the material is not resonant. It's basswood or linden, and it doesn't conduct resonance well at all.
It's amazing. It's
yeah,
the way it's
nothing. Light, and it's super strong.
And the way it's like rubber. The way it it flexes. It's
everything
uniform.
Every component of our guitar is we're using engineering principles to get maximum strength, minimum weight. And so we make a much lighter guitar than some people, but we make a stronger guitar than most people in that regard. So anyway, back to this. So now we have this sitting, it's isolated from the sides. So when the string energy reaches the edge, it doesn't go, it goes back into the top, allowing more sustain and more projection. So we can make this guitar be very efficient as projection out to the audience. Everything made out of molecules vibrates whether you want it to or not. So we do get great presence for the player, but the efficiency goes out to the audience. Now, we can manipulate that. We could take half the holes out of it. We could make it out of increasingly denser pieces of wood or more resonant pieces of wood and bring the presence closer in. A mean trick that mass producers do is they make the guitar sound the best to the player at the expense of what projects to the audience. And, because most people buy a guitar based on what they hear by themselves in a music store.
Sure.
So but now we have something to support the airspace and isolate the top for vibration transfer. So let's go over here. And what you saw Sam doing in the binding allows us the same degree of control as we did with those linings, because it connects the top to the sides. And the material that we use will affect the presence of the guitar also. And plastic is probably not, well, it's just not the best thing to use to do that. What is what the violin makers use, that purple, that black, white, black that's on your guitar, is not solid wood. It's wood that's been mushed up, rolled out, reconstituted, and like paper or fiber. And what that does is it eliminates the possibility of varying densities throughout the natural growing piece. It's uniform in density. And the nature of it, once you put it between the top and the sides, it isolates it. It doesn't absorb energy, it isolates it to do it. So likewise, the very outside binding, remember I was telling you we use a cellulose product or wood rather than plastic on that. We can make it look like ivory, tortoiseshell, black, whatever we want from that. All these details add time. Any one of them might not be dramatic, but the nature of excellence in what we do is a combination of all those things adding up, to get what we want. So we will bind it and do varying bindings depending on customer request, aesthetics, differentiate between the models, and sometimes it can get pretty complex. We can use shell like abalone and achieve the same effect of isolation and make it really pretty. So then lastly, there's a secondary tuning that happens because we need the top to, the note the top makes agree with the note of the air space. If it doesn't, you wasted your time because you canceled everything out. And it's random, even in our control, it's random what you get. So in the final cosmetic sanding and stuff, it's tuned so it is an agreement. So you can listen to a guitar body before and after, and the after is more resonant, it blows more air on your face, and sustains longer. All desirable qualities. Now, there's a big controversy rages on the internet about what's better, a Dovetail or a bolt-on. Larger companies that use bolt-on really promote the benefits of that. It's really specific to the guitar. If we were doing the kind of assembly I was talking about, where we pre-made all our parts, we put them together, we're looking for efficiencies, Dovetail's not going to be that big a deal in what you do. For our stuff, what we do with this sensitive assembly, this super resonant chamber, we can really do subtle things that really change the sound of that and direct the sound differently. So for our guitars, the Dovetail's vastly superior to a mechanical fastener. For guitars that already use bolt-on necks, maybe not so much, So I don't say one's better than the other. It depends on the application. This is a great example of, man versus machine. John Henry and the steam hammer, or Paul Bunyan and the chainsaw. Is the CNC can travel, its build is accurate within 1/10,000th of an inch, plus or minus. That's good enough to make machinery. And it describes the travel of the machine. And in titanium, space-age ceramics, you hold those tolerances, not in wood. In wood that's hard and soft, you get some variance. So we'll get a better fit with these kind of things by hand than you would by machine. So these things are finally fit by hand to the guitar. The geometry is critical for playability and optimal driving of the top for sound, and the range of adjustment for the playing style. And once we fit the neck to the body, they can separate and go into finish. And finish for us is it's a really great addition to what we're looking for in sound. So there's three things we want out of finish. We want it to add rather than subtract from the integrity of the sound of the guitar. We want it to look really expensive, and we want to be able to restore it if it's damaged. So working from the last first is restoration is different than repair. Restoring is bringing something back to its original intent. And there's a tenet in among a code of ethics in a certain style of violin making, and it is the value you put in your instrument is not just for your customer, it's for the generation beyond and maybe beyond that. That's where there's a huge amount of value, or the heirloom quality in the instrument, that you make it restorable. And so that's the joinery that you use, the glues that you use, and the finish that you use, that they're all the intent to be brought back to original. So this finish is, it's nitrocellulose, but what it is in our case, it's cotton fiber dissolved in a solvent, cotton fiber again being wood or cellulose. So we're making liquid wood and applying it to the guitar in successive coats. It enhances the sound of the guitar. It's repairable in that it can be, if it's broken, it can be solved, new lacquer amalgamated, and although it's an art, it can be restored to its original intent. And lastly, it looks great. You know, sounds good, repairable, looks great. It's more. It takes more time. You can touch that. That's okay.
So I noticed on my Skye, the finish is really thin to the point where you can see the grain.
Yeah, well, what you're
and
seeing
feel it. You can feel
it's not necessarily the thinness of the lacquer, it's that the lacquer's conformed to the grain. So as the guitar shrinks and swells, that the lacquer conforms to the wood. And the grains are actually little holes, you know. They're filled with a little paste, but it takes a lot of finish to make that. So you're right, it is thinner. It takes a lot of finish to make that not show. And you don't find in a violin, you don't find a shiny finish. In fact, it'd look really cheap if you did. So consider it a good thing.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And on these, actually, what you're seeing is you're seeing the last spray pattern because it hasn't been polished. And so it looks like a little bit like an orange peel. So it takes more time to do this, but like everything else, it's truly added value in what you get in the guitar. So not everybody may want to pay in that price range, but you do actually pay for added value in this. These guitars are in this our warm, dry room here to get hard enough for a final polish, and that's 7 to 10 days in this case. We do that. Neat chance to see the different woods that we use, and one of our specialties is color, and it's not so apparent here. We'll see it in the next room. Here's some really beautiful koa here. Here's mahogany that has, it's actually like an oxidizer that makes it look like it has been out in the sun for a long time, so it's a real natural look to it. Some will shade to get a nice retro look.
And is this Brazilian, or is that koa?
This is koa here, and this is cocobolo. Here's a Brazilian back right here, and without finish on it, you don't quite see all the color yet with it. But that's a spectacular Brazilian back. And again, this is like stuff from the 1920s or 30s.
So just to be clear for watchers, if my guitar, after years of wear and tear, I could just send it back to you guys and pay to have you fix it.
We do a lot of customer service. Our guitar has a lifetime warranty, but here's a nice little expose. The warranty on a guitar is for defects in workmanship, and even on real cheap guitars. It probably doesn't go out if it has a defect in that. It probably doesn't make it in the marketplace. So to actually have something come up under warranty is pretty rare. It does happen. And so we look at it more like customer service. What we do guarantee is the neck angle of the guitar. As far as I know, we're the only ones that do that. If over time, stress and strain of the instrument raise the action to the point you can't lower the saddle anymore, we'll reset the neck to the original of it. We do a lot of stuff for customers for free just because it's a cool thing to do. And most of the problems people have with getting warranty work done are with companies that make zillions of products a year, and they can't carry that kind of liability. For us, it's not an onerous thing to be able to accommodate. So that's our warranty story. Here's guitars now that have been through the process, and here you can see some really neat color work. This is different from this. These are different from that, and this is different. They're all mahogany, all these, and they've all been treated differently to get a different vibe, really. Again, this is the oxidation that makes it look like it's old, as opposed to the natural look here. This is to imitate what was done years ago when mahogany was the blue-collar sister of rosewood, and companies like Gibson kind of painted it brown to make it look like rosewood, and we do a nice little translucent to make it look retro. And then this one's got a little subtle shading in it just to make it look really old. And sometimes you don't even notice where the shading stops and starts. It's just a little highlight that we airbrush into the guitar to do.
So you see a lot from guitarists about mahogany being the stepchild.
Yeah,
But mahogany is actually in other areas really expensive,
Oh, it is.
high quality wood,
Yeah.
and guitars seem to be just catching on to that again.
Yeah, and I like to think a lot of that's our fault, because I spent a whole career trying to promote mahogany as a real tone wood. Where I believe it comes from is if you go back in time, the difference in price between rosewood and mahogany would have been pretty great, because mahogany was plentiful. It's what everything was made out of. Rosewood was more difficult to get. So furniture, pianos, office paneling, stuff like that, the expensive stuff with rosewood, the less expensive stuff was mahogany. So that carried into guitars. Martin specifically, their least appointed model was mahogany. Their most appointed models were rosewood. So people just have that in their DNA over years and years and years. And so hopefully our puny efforts start to turn that tide and have people realize it. Plus, we're more discerning as players now than people were in the past as a whole, and people hear it. And people play these guitars and go, wow, there's not only nothing lacking there, but that's a really sophisticated sound.
Yeah.
So anyway, mahogany's coming into its own. But this is our 34D, and the concept behind this guitar is all the materials were cut and ready to be made into instruments in the 1930s. And so the woods are really old. We get the advantage of the polymerized resins, the sound and stuff like that, and it's put together with really old-fashioned glue that believe it or not affects the sound. Right. And the techniques that we use on this are really low tension, low stress, so the guitar is relaxed in the beginning. It takes a lot of time. The materials are super expensive, but this is every trick luthiers know incorporated in this of why old guitars sound better than new ones, and we're doing it in a brand new guitar. And the finish on this is great. We actually airbrush and tint the binding to make it look really old. So it's as old as it can look without cheating and taking pizza cutters and ropes and hairspray to it and distressing it.
Can I get you to comment on the notion of opening up over time?
Yeah, exactly. You already learned a couple of neat secrets about old violins or old guitars. One of the reasons they sound better is that the wood is cured and got more resonant over time. So we cheat and start with old wood. The second one is they're built with, especially in a factory where a guitar really, in some places, could go through in hours. There's tensions built in there that will take sometimes years to relax enough for the guitar to reach its full potential in resonance. That's one of the things people experience over time. Part of it's playing, but mostly it's just being there under tension that makes it relax. Then there's this thing that's real that the violin makers call de-damping. And it's like, the opposite of damping. Instead of dampening something, allowing it to come to life. And that is, I can describe it by, if you sat down with ice cream and put on a movie, and when you finish your ice cream, you started just twiddling with the stick. You don't bend and break the fibers, you just kind of bend it. And you can already get it starts to get more elastic over time. Still has its integrity, but it's more elastic. And that happens with guitar under vibration. But let's bust a myth. You put your guitar in front of a speaker, you're blasting it with all kinds of frequencies. What really does the de-damping is the sympathetic frequency of either the airspace of the body, the actual frequency of the top itself. So when you excite the guitar at that frequency, it will de-damp it and give the effect of being played for a long time. If you just blast a speaker at it, it's so random, it can take a really long time to get an effect. And you got to make it howl. You don't just put an aquarium pump on it and go, you really make it howl. It's kind of scary, in fact. But we do enough already with our guitar that last process of de-damping is a small amount of return for the effort to do it. So it's okay for us to send the guitar out and let that process. Our guitar is much more lively and old sounding new than most guitars are after years. So the de-damping thing is not that big a deal to us. But if you want it, we'll do it for you. Cool. These wheels in here are for the final buffing. And with the nitrocellulose, actually polishing anything is removing scratches with smaller scratches until it looks shiny. Until you give up and say it's shiny, and then you fill those scratches up with wax, and you got a shiny surface. So our style is we want to sand a lot and buff a little because the buffing generates heat, and we buff to a nice gloss, and then we wax it. And when we're done, it looks completely flat and glassy. And over time, in reaction to the wood shrinking and swelling and atmospheric changes, it will look more like an old violin than an antique bar top or bowling alley. We want this connection here to be super clean. We want to be able to take this neck out for repair at any time in the future and not break the lacquer surface here. Again, restorability. It should be invisible that the neck ever came in and went out. And the dovetail joint, like its counterpart in the violin, is designed to come out. It takes very little glue to hold that in place because mechanically it's strong enough to hold the string pull. The only place it comes out is this direction. So it doesn't need glue to hold it against string tension. It just needs glue to hold it in place. So when we decide to remove this, removing the thread and drilling a tiny hole here and injecting steam into the joint loosens the glue in a hurry, and it can come out and go back. So, it's truly not a lot more problem than unbolting a neck. A little skill and cleanup and a little time to let things dry, but it's very effective. Yeah.
Is this the one?
This was a personal project I spent about a year and a half putting together with a lot of help from the other guys here in the shop.
It's beautiful.
But it's based on one of our TR Pros with a Bigsby style headstock.
Awesome.
Maple neck.
That's so funny.
I had to go there.
And
It's just huge.
so we get it on video.
That sounds fantastic.
Tell us your name and
My name's Gerard Egan here at the Santa Cruz Guitar Company. And this guitar is based on a guitar that Paul Bigsby built for Merle Travis in the early 50s, I believe. And obviously the big thing is that 6-in-line headstock. Otherwise, the rest of the body is similar to one of our dreadnoughts. It's got some custom doodads here and there. But I kind of went for all the bells and whistles on it.
is it tuned up?
Yeah,
Eric, you want to do the minute?
Oh yeah, sure.
have at it.
Yeah. Nice little kick.
Sorry, they brought their own guitar there.
Sounds great, right? Yeah.
Wow,
It's just wicked.
I love this.
that's awesome.
Thank you. Makes me smile every time I see it.
Yeah, this is really fun. The guitar makers, after they've been here a while, do have the privilege of making a personal instrument, and for them, of course, it's great. As you see with this, it's a really professional instrument. What it does for us collectively is people will experiment with stuff that we might not think about or even think would work. So we get R&D out of that. And as Gerard explained, what he gets is the benefit of working with other guys in the shop in their specialties. So not only does he get an idea about those skills for future possibilities for him, but he also gains an appreciation for what his co-workers do. I'll speak for myself. As a human being, oftentimes I would think I'm the most important part of an organization and what goes on, but getting a chance to actually see what other people do really makes it cohesive, a real appreciation for what we do as a group. So that's the reason we do that. The guitar is assembled, all the geometry is really dialed in, and then what Gerard will do here is our setup is like the hot rod setup that a tech would do for a musician once they bought their guitar, like an aftermarket thing. And what that is, again, it's easier to describe what the mass producer does. The easy way to set up a guitar would be to kind of flatten the fingerboard, put the frets in, and then grind the top of the frets flat so you don't get a buzz when you play. But what that does is that's not the way the string moves. The string moves, it's fixed here and here, it moves in a long ellipse, it moves more in the middle. So shaping the neck to the movement of that string is going to allow you to get a lot closer to the fingerboard and a lot more facility. Also, if you grind the top of the frets to get it level, you have tall frets, short frets, because of the shape of the fingerboard, top of the frets. And as you play, this is subtle, but it's there. Intonation will change based on how far you press the string down, and the tone will vary over the fingerboard. And you don't necessarily notice that till you hear one that's perfect, and then you go, oh, I'd like that. And that's why pros or really serious people in the know would take their instrument once they bought it and go to somebody to get it really dialed in, maybe even refretted. So what we do here is we start out by shaping the fingerboard to the final surface that we want. And it's not only going to be radiused and more at the nut than it is down at the base, but it's going to be shaped in the shape of that the bass string moves and that the treble string moves. And each of these strings has a different excursion, and so you can shape the board with that. The truss rod is to allow more or less curvature overall for how hard somebody plays the guitar. And we'll do this. We'll fret the guitar. Then it needs almost nothing removed from the top of the fret. And this is Gerard Casper do that here, and they're experts. They're the best in the world. They've done hundreds of guitars, thousands between them, and they can really dial it in. In fact, so much so that when we put it on this state-of-the-art device to scan it, it tells us you're okay, you're good. What this machine's designed to do is do that kind of precision. But what we have it for instead is to keep these guys from suffering the repetitive stress of that shaping of the board, the crowning of the frets, and things like that. So it does the tough work, just like our robot in the back. And what we did with Eric's guitar is we brought it in and we scanned it, and it said, oh, that's fine, and then we dressed everything up as we talked about. Ended up with the right stuff. So our setup is really involved. It's real time consuming. The fact that we know who every guitar goes to, sometimes it gives us the ability to really dial it in for their playing style. If not, we have both a very sophisticated adjustable truss rod, the ability to adjust nut and saddle, and people dial it in. And I always say this to customers that a new guitar is like a new car. You'd never accept where the factory puts the rear view mirror. So why pick your guitar up and decide if it's a good one or a bad one by how it plays? If it's made well, it can be adjusted. So that from beginning to end takes us on the simplest guitar we make maybe 8 weeks. The record is 2.5 years on a really complicated one, but we're usually more towards the 8 weeks on stuff.
My relationship with Richard is something that I can't even put into words how much I treasure. It's such a great opportunity to be a player and to work with a legendary builder. And what can you say? It's a dream come true. And he's a good friend.